Sometimes the ones we call servants end up serving the truth itself. This is the story of Rosie, a maid who once cleaned dust and then uncovered the dirt that power tried to hide. After exposing the lies of a billionaire's wife, Rosie left the city for good. She wanted peace, silence, and a chance to start again. But fate had other plans. Rosie arrived in the quiet town of Maplewood, a place far from cameras, crowds, and chaos. Her heart carried scars, but her spirit was strong. Through a small agency, she got a new job, housekeeping for Margaret Hale, an elderly widow who lived alone in her vast countryside mansion. Unlike the cold, cruel people Rosie had served before, Margaret was kind, soft-spoken, and full of stories. She treated Rosie not as a servant, but as a person. "You remind me of myself when I was younger," Margaret said one afternoon, smiling over her teacup. Strong outside, but still healing inside. The Hale mansion was old but beautiful, filled with portraits, books, and quiet rooms where time seemed to stop. Rosie spent her days dusting shelves, watering plants, and keeping Margaret company. They laughed, talked, and even shared meals together, something Rosie never imagined doing in any of her old jobs. But not everyone was happy with her presence. Margaret's children, Victoria, Edward, and Simon, visited only occasionally, and every time they came, they brought tension with them. "Mother, why is the maid eating with you?" Victoria sneered once. Margaret replied calmly, "Because kindness doesn't depend on a uniform." Rosie quietly kept cleaning, but her eyes saw everything. During one dinner, the argument turned ugly. Edward demanded that Margaret sign over her estate early. Simon accused her of wasting money on charity. "I'll decide what happens to my life's work," Margaret said firmly. "And it will go to those who deserve it." Rosie stood silently in the corner, serving wine, but she noticed the fear in Margaret's eyes. That night, Margaret asked her to stay late. In the dim light of her study, Margaret handed Rosie a small sealed envelope. "If anything happens to me, Rosie, keep this safe. It's my true will, the real one. My children would never understand." Rosie hesitated. "Ma'am, promise me," Margaret said, her eyes glistening. "I trust you more than I've ever trusted them." Rosie nodded. She hid the envelope in a cleaning supply box, her hands trembling. In the dim light of her study, Margaret handed Rosie a small sealed envelope. "If anything happens to me, Rosie, keep this safe. It's my true will, the real one. My children would never understand." Rosie hesitated. "Ma'am, promise me," Margaret said, her eyes glistening. "I trust you more than I've ever trusted them." Rosie nodded. She hid the envelope in a cleaning supply box, her hands trembling. 3 days later, everything changed. Rosie entered Margaret's room one morning, and found her still, pale, and lifeless. The doctor said it was a heart attack. The family arrived within hours, fake tears and greedy eyes. Victoria immediately began searching drawers, muttering, "Where's the will?" When she couldn't find it, her anger turned to Rosie. "You were the last one with her. Where is it?" Rosie tried to explain, but no one listened. The police arrived that afternoon. Edward told them Rosie was hiding something. Simon claimed she'd stolen jewelry. Rosie's bag was searched. Nothing. Her room, nothing. But she could feel their hatred, sharp as knives. When she mentioned the envelope Margaret gave her, they laughed. "You expect us to believe she would trust you?" Victoria spat. Rosie stayed silent. The truth was her only weapon, and she wasn't ready to use it yet. That night, Rosie stayed alone in her small servant room. She could hear footsteps in the hallway, whispers, drawers opening, papers rustling. Someone was searching for the will. She checked her hidden spot. The envelope was gone. Her heart sank. They had found it. The next morning, she was fired. Victoria's cold words echoed. "You're lucky we're not pressing charges. Leave before noon." Rosie packed silently. But as she turned to go, she noticed something strange, a piece of paper peeking from under Margaret's old painting. She pulled it out. It was a handwritten note, Margaret's handwriting. "If you're reading this, they've found me before the truth could. The copy is hidden where the house first meets the morning light." Rosie's eyes widened. The morning light. The east window. Late that night, Rosie returned quietly. The moonlight guided her to the east corridor, where sunlight hit every morning. She lifted an old vase, moved a small tile, and there it was. The real will, sealed in a glass envelope. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Margaret had trusted her for a reason. Next morning, Rosie walked straight into the lawyer's office. She handed over the document. Within days, the truth came out. Margaret's fortune was to be donated to create the Hale Home, a foundation for poor women and domestic workers. The family was left with nothing. The news broke everywhere. Black Maid saves hidden will, exposes family's greed. Victoria, Edward, and Simon tried to challenge the will, but the handwriting, seals, and date were undeniable. Rosie refused interviews. She didn't want fame. She wanted justice. Months later, construction began for the Hale home. Rosie became its caretaker, managing, helping, and teaching women to earn with dignity. She kept Margaret's photo in the main hall, with a small plaque that read, "For those who were never seen, but always served." Years later, the Hale children faded into obscurity. Victoria divorced. Edward lost his company. Simon moved abroad. And Rosie? She stood strong, surrounded by women whose lives were changing because of that one promise she kept. One rainy evening, Rosie visited Margaret's grave. She placed a single white flower. "You trusted me, ma'am," she whispered, "and I kept my word." The rain washed her tears away, but her heart felt light. The camera slowly zooms out, Rosie walking down the gravel path, umbrella in hand, the mansion glowing softly behind her. Narration fades in. Sometimes truth hides in silence, waiting for someone brave enough to lift the dust. Rosie was that someone. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe, and give your feedback in comments.